Welcome, everybody, to the Belmont Stakes Preview Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Belmont Preview Show is brought to you by Bet DSI.eu. To get up to 100% cash back bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000, make sure you put the promo code TGT in when you go to Bet DSI.eu, or you can go to the gruelingtruth.com page. Click on the banner at the top of the page for Bet DSU or DSI, and that will give you the bonus also. I am your host for the Belmont Stakes Special, Mike Goodpaster, and Bobby, a little tongue-tied here at the start. I'm used to starting off with Survive in Advance or the Sheridan Report or the boxing show.
Yes.
Now we're going with the Belmont Stakes. I want to welcome in my guest tonight. First up, you know him from the Sheridan Report. He's on every day at approximately 2:30 on the Grueling Truth. Bobby Sheridan, how you doing, Bobby?
I'm doing great, Mike, and I'm just so honored again to have these two gentlemen with us, and just really anxious to hear some stories and to hear some numbers and see where this thing's breaking down.
All right, and our guest today, first up, we have one of the best handicappers in the business. Help me welcome to the show, Phil Rankin. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
And, of course, we have a legend in the house again. And I know everybody's saying, hey, you just introduced Bobby. Who else could it be? So we've got Vince Degregory. How you doing, Vince?
Doing very, very good, and happy to be on the show again. And hopefully we can enlighten your listeners with some insights that maybe pick a winner or two for them so they can make some money.
All right, and you guys, I think, picked it the last race, and without the DQ, one of you got it in the first one. So I would highly recommend everybody pay attention to what they hear here. And I want to remind everybody, you can go to www.thehandicappingguide.com to get all Phil's picks. He gives you the top 7 horses. How about this, Phil? Give them a rundown on what you offer at the Handicapping Guide real quick before we get back to Vince.
Okay, what we do every day is we try to provide what we call a multi-track card for people. It usually is involved with the 4 major states of like New York, Florida, California, and Kentucky. It takes tracks from those states, and we try to put on at least 6, especially on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. During the week when the cards are and racing's a little lighter, it's down to maybe 4 or 5 tracks for a very small amount. So what you get for what we put out is a pretty good bargain. Just go on the website that's on the banner of the Grueling Truth. Click on there and it'll take you to all the information you need.
All right, so let's get started. We're at the Belmont Stakes, the third leg of the Triple Crown. Of course, there's no Triple Crown winner this year, but there was in 1973 a horse most of you have probably heard of. Unless Steve Risley's listened, he's probably never heard of Secretariat. But Secretariat won by 31 lengths, the largest margin of victory in Belmont history. And I know, Vince, you've got a story about that race?
Yeah, leading up to the story was when I was in Kentucky for the Kentucky Derby with Frank Martin, who was the trainer of Sham, and we were standing on a bench, and we got to the lead about 70 yards from the wire, and this big old chestnut come flying by us, and we broke the track record, and he broke our record at the same time, and very excited about going to the Preakness. I said, well, we'll get him in the Preakness. So we got to the Preakness, and the same situation happened. He went by us like we were standing still at the half-mile pole, and we started after him through the lane, and we got beat about 1.5 lengths, but he was more in hand than we were driving. So after the race, Lafitte said to me, Vince, we can't go to the Belmont and ride Sham. This horse is not right now, and this horse broke his record. I broke his heart. I said, how am I going to tell Frank Martin, who's the leading trainer? He puts us on all the winners there. And so the story was we went, didn't want to go. We knew how great that Secretariat was at that moment when he went by us in the Preakness. And, of course, Lafitte in the Belmont Stakes was so dejected that down at the three-quarter pole he pulled Sham up. And of course, Secretariat went on and blew the doors off everybody and win by 31 lengths and win coaxing, to be honest with you. And Frank Martin was kind of dejected and upset with Lafitte for pulling the horse up. And the fact story behind it is that when you have an athlete such as Pinkay and if he gives you an answer that you probably shouldn't run against that other horse in the Belmont, but sometimes our ego gets involved with trainers and they just can't take the defeat, and they continually say, "Oh, no, we can beat him this time." And of course, the story was that Lafitte never wanted to go. I had him go, and he had to pull the horse up after 3/4 of a mile, and Sham never ran again. But trying to explain to you, Mike, and to Bobby, is being involved with an athlete. When you work for jockeys, you listen to what they have to say. And when he told me that, it was hard for me to get the point across to Frank Martin that this horse is not right. He's lost. He's had it. He's like a fighter that got knocked out 3 or 4 times and got up, and the next thing is he took his heart was gone, and of course they never come back and be the same. So in this situation, my story was about Lafitte Pinkay not going to go up against the great Secretariat the 3rd time, and it was quite a thrill for me to be there when he beat us in the Kentucky Derby. But the situation is sometimes horses get beat by another horse, and it's hard for a trainer to take a jockey's advice and say, well, let's not go run against that horse. Let's pass and give him some time off. But the sad story was that Secretariat just not only tore his heart out the first 2 times, but the 3rd time Lafitte said, "The hell with this," and that was it. So after 3/4, he pulled the horse up, and that was my story about the Belmont. That it was just a cakewalk for Secretariat, the great horse that he was, and I was proud to be there when he beat me with Sam in the Kentucky Derby.
Now, that Derby, I watched it, or the Belmont Stakes that year. It only had like 5 or 6 horses in the race, didn't it?
That's correct, Phil. A lot of horses didn't want to go up against him. They knew how great he reached his peak at that moment from his 3-year-old career, and he was a giant against boys. That's what it turned out to be.
Now, do you think Secretariat's the greatest racehorse of all time?
My personal feeling behind who I think is the greatest racehorse, because I've seen so many of them, I always thought Forgo, 5-time horse of the year, carried 136, 37. No matter what track you put him on, the only thing he didn't run good in California with the hard racetracks, but as an old man, he went and won the Washington, D.C. International on the grass, and he was something special. And our Carroll told me that Eddie was like my godfather to begin with. As you know, the story, he helped me get started as an agent. And I always used to ask him questions. Eddie, who's the greatest horse you've ever ridden? And up to that point, before Secretariat, he said Citation was. He had won 25 races, I guess, out of 28 in his career. But as time progressed, and then he said to me, Kelso is the greatest. And I'll tell you one little story about that. He ran in my dad's home in Saratoga, and I was privileged to listen to him on conversations with owners and that called him all the time. And the phone rang, and he picked up the phone, and he said, "Oh, how you doing?" I didn't know who was on the other end. And the conversation, he kept talking, "Oh, the horse is doing great and doing this and that." And there was a lull. And then he said, "Listen, Mrs. DuPont, I'm not going to tell you how good Kelso is, and I'm not going to let anybody know how good he is." And I'm listening. I said, "Wow, what the hell is this?" He said, "If I let him run, they'll put 150 pounds on his back. I'm not going to let you or anybody else know it." And I said, "Holy shit, look at this, how he's telling Mrs. DuPont that." But that was our Carroll, and he protected that horse through most of his career until Eddie finally decided to retire because his eyes were going and his legs were going. But I was kind of shocked, and that's when I knew then when he told me Chelsea was the greatest horse that he had ever ridden. And, of course, I was around the great Forgo that summer in Saratoga. Lafitte broke his collarbone in Chicago, and by the time he got to New York, the doctor said you can't ride for 6 or 7 weeks. So I went to work for Heliodoro Agustinus, who I knew from Panama long before I became an agent, and he asked me to be his agent that summer in Saratoga. And I had the opportunity of being with Gerald Ward in the ring, Forgo at the barn most of the time, and to see that big horse with big oxlets, his ankles were as big as my head, and he was in ice every day. And then to see him go out there and carry 135, 136 and win, those were great thrills for me on the greatest horses. I'm not knocking Secretariat in any way. Secretariat didn't race on to be 5 or 6. Of course, he was worth so much money. He went to stud. Who knows? He could have wound up doing the same thing as Forgo or as Kelso. But Secretariat, in his peak of his career, I don't think anybody could have beat him. That goes for Kelso or the other Forgo either. But those two horses got great when they got older. But him as a 3-year-old, he was fantastic.
All right, we got a few listener questions. I'll direct that Phil and Vince and Bobby if he wants to. But if you want to ask any questions to Phil or Vince, you can send us a direct message at Grueling Truth on Twitter. So make sure you do that. Or you can listen to us on Spreaker. Just find the Grueling Truth. You can ask questions there too. Question number 1 is from at KY Derby 68. Do the horses coming out of the Preakness have an edge in the Belmont Stakes, Vince?
Well, that's probably why I'm going to take my selection on the horse that bypassed the Preakness, and that's the Tapit horse, Tacitus. Yeah, I do think the grueling, only because of the jockeys that I've worked for, whenever they ride in the Triple Crown, they always come up and give you the right answers as you need to make selections for the next race coming up. And most of the jocks always tell you after the Preakness, most of those horses are going to go a grueling mile and a half. They're so knocked out from the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness that they just somehow, the last 20 yards, they get beat. And if you go back and think about all the great horses that were going for the Triple Crown, they got beat in the last 3 or 4 jumps, and I think that's the answer behind it all. A fresh horse coming out of the Kentucky Derby and bypassing the Preakness, he's coming in fresh, and he's ready to tassel with some of them horses that are wore out from the campaign. So I personally believe that is true, that if a horse comes in and passes the Preakness, and he did run in the Derby and run well, then he has a great chance. And, of course, Mother and Daddy got something to say about that, and the Belmont being a mile and a half. Got to hope that the bloodlines are improved, that the horses can go that far.
All right, we have another question from A. Hickman 2. And this is, I think this falls in line with everything we do here, because as with most Triple Crown races, I think the pace of the race is a major factor and plays a huge role in the results, and I think we saw that in the Derby and the Preakness. And Adam's question is, Joeva can go as fast or as slow as he wants. Is anybody here worried that he could possibly go wire to wire in the Belmont Stakes? That's for,
no,
we'll go with Vince first, and then Phil can answer.
Yeah, I don't believe any horse is going to go to the lead and go wire to wire, and that every jockey is going to sit still, because most jocks ride their race and they're excited to be in the Belmont, and sometimes they override their horses. And if they got cheap speed and a horse gets out on the lead, and the first thing they'll do, they'll go chase, and they'll let that jock on the lead horse slow the pace down and back everybody up. So when they ask their horse for that big run, they can't go that fast, because the horse on the lead will have something left. So I don't think that's going to happen in the Belmont, to be honest with you.
Now, if something like that was to happen with Joeva, or I know I'm probably saying his name wrong, but Phil, would something like that hurt a horse like War of Will by draining his energy from using early speed for tactical position?
Well, over the years, the winner of the Belmont has always shown speed, not necessarily to be on the lead, but horses coming from far behind in this race do not do well. And so I think it's going to be a tactical race. That horse, anytime there's a speed horse in the race, you got to respect it. But I just don't think he's the same caliber as the 9 and the 10, Tacitus and War Will, in my opinion.
All right, we got.
I agree with you, Phil. To interject, there's 3 or 4 speed horses in this race. He isn't the only speed. I got news for you.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And Bourbon War is going to show speed. Just throw the last race out that was in the slot for most of these horses, because that's not the true race that horses are going to run. They got that mud and the stuff on the goggles that blocks their vision, and they don't put out the horses. So I sincerely think there's going to be a lot of speed in here. I think not only that, Sir Winston is going to show speed. Bourbon War, Intrepid Heart is going to show speed. The only problem, to get back to what that question was asked, and to be truthful about the Belmont, through the last, 86 races, I got a stat on that. Of the last 88 races, since 1926, only 5 of the horses that were that far back in the race, approaching the top of the stretch. And remember this, Belmont Park, their stretch is about 600 yards, much shorter than a lot of other racetracks. So if a horse is 2 lengths away from the top of the stretch, his chances of winning are pretty nil. So all these come behind horses that sit back there and relax, and there'll be 5 or 6 lengths behind by the time they make that turn. Some horses always somehow have something left. Mid-pack usually gets the job done in the Belmont. So that's quite a stat. Since 1926, 5 of the 88 winners, if they're not close to 2 lengths approaching the top of the stretch, they don't win. Think about that.
All right, and you talk. Go ahead.
Isn't that quite a stat when you think about it, Phil?
Yes, it is.
I mean, jocks can't sit still on the Belmont and think, well, wow, they're going to come back to me. And if you're 5 or 6 lengths back there approaching the quarter pole, the odds of you catching up and winning because the stretch is shorter than most other racetracks. That's the difference.
Yeah, and
well, a lot of people don't get it. If it's a mile and a half, and they think that you can sit back and come late, and it's really not the truth. This doesn't happen.
Yeah, because it shortens up the track down the backstretch, correct, or the final stretch.
That's right, because Belmont's got a dip. They start a mile in front of the grandstand. So, at the chute in Belmont, they come out of the chute for a mile race. They start a mile and a half right in front of the grandstand. So that's a long run into the first turn, all down the backside. And then the stretch is much shorter. So that's the reason why when you're handicapping, all of your listeners, try to get some horses you know that you like. Don't pick the ones that are going to be 8 or 10 lengths back, lagging back there, because you lose your money. I sincerely mean that.
All right, next up we have a question from @Friend of Racing. He is talking about Bourbon War, who you just talked about a little bit. I think it was Vince that talked about him. Blinkers are off on Bourbon War this race. They were on in the Preakness. What kind of difference does that make here, guys?
I'll let Phil go.
Well, I'm not a big equipment fan. I'm a big fan on what my numbers tell me. I want to explain something before we get into the numbers so people understand when I give a selection and give a rating number. That rating number is based on almost 40 handicapping factors. So when I give my numbers today on the horses, I'll give the name of the horse and the post position number or saddle cloth, whatever you want to call it. And the 3-digit figure I give is what I call the past performance rating. And that's almost 40 handicapping factors right out of the racing form. I know a lot of handicappers only use a half a dozen, and they use their animal instincts, whatever you want to call it. My numbers are based on the same formula for each horse. All these 40 handicapping factors right out of the racing form that people that read the form are looking at these. And so when I give that, take heed, it works. Sometimes I have people laugh, well, how can you pick that horse? Well, sometimes they cry in their beer a lot of times. But anyway, when I just wanted to let you know what that past performance rating number represents. When I give that out with the horse and the number, post position number, you'll understand what that number represents.
Mike, can I answer that question for you, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Can I answer the question? Okay, looking at Bourbon War. Now, you see that he had won 2 other races, and the only time he ever put blinkers on was the last race that he had run, and that was in the Preakness. And I think the only reason he did that, because he's been showing he lags way behind in the Preakness, very, very sharp turns. You got to get your horse to be up early in the race, and I think they put the blinkers on thinking that maybe that would help this horse be more aggressive early in the race. so he wouldn't have to be so far back. And now, looking at the race that he run, he was 8th, 10th, and looks like that by them putting the blinkers on and tried to use aggressive move with him on him, he probably more or less didn't like that. So they're taking him off to get him to be more relaxed since they're going to go a mile and a half.
Hey Vince, that's a good point, because one day several years ago when I was learning this business, I had standing by a group of guys, and they were hot shots. You know, they had, I don't know how many beers in them, but they were hot shots. They knew everything about racing. You know, you've seen that situation. But anyway, one of them says, oh, that 2-horse, he has no chance. He doesn't have blinkers on. He says, I'd never bet a first-time maiden without blinkers. Well, let me explain something to you that I've learned from a lot of people. Now, there's probably people listening right now that may agree with that guy, but these young horses stepping on the track for the first time, or even a 3-year-old that's been 3 or 4 races down the road, they are still learning, and they have so much to do. Don't confuse them by putting a mask over their head. I frown on that when I see that. I go, why do you put a set of blinkers on a horse before he's even raced? You don't even know. So I'm not a big believer in putting blinkers on a horse when he has never raced before. It's just something that is just added to all the distractions that he may have. And you answered that yourself, Vince. You're just with this horse. They could have found that out with this Bourbon War. I have this horse ranked 3rd.
Okay, now what you're saying, I can more give you more into it, because a lot of times the jocks will come back and say, Vince, that horse is looking all around. See if you can get the call back on the horse. Then go tell the trainer you like to see if you can work him in blinkers and see how he works before you put him in a race. And that's what we do a lot of times. And a lot of other things, I can say this to the fans. There's a lot of times a jockey will ride a 2-year-old, and he'll run so far, and next thing is down through the lane, he'll be stopping. And me being with the jock, and he'll say to me, that horse has got a breathing problem. He was swallowing his tongue. Tell that trainer until you get the call back, I want to go work him. And I think that we tie his tongue down, he'll be able to breathe okay, and then he'll win. So, and I can tell you the story with Chris McCarron to this story when I first went to work for him, and I told him everything the way we got to work. I said, whatever you do, you want to ride a horseback, don't you tell the trainer if there's going to be an equipment change until I get the call. Don't tell him, because you get off the horse and you're excited. Say, oh, that horse, he couldn't breathe, and put a tongue tie on. So he called me that night, and he said that horse, he couldn't breathe in the last 20 yards, Vince. He said he was swallowing his tongue. He said, I told the trainer. Well, you idiot, you told the trainer you're not going to ride that horse back. You kidding me? I said, Pink K will be on that horse. Well, sure as God made green apples, Pink K was on him, and he win by many. And Chris said to me, I'll never do that again. So all I'm trying to tell the public is a lot of times blinkers go on because the jock asks for them, because in the race the horse is looking around and not putting out with a fluid motion that he's stopping and staring while he's running. So that's why you'll see blinkers go on horses that have been running for a long time. The jocks might tell him, he's still looking around too much, let's put a set of blinkers. A lot of times it depends on what kind of blinkers. Full cup or open cup. A lot of them open just on the side so they can't look way to the left. But a full cup, they want their eyes to be looking straight ahead at all times. They can't look from side to side. But that's another thing trying to teach the public about blinkers. There's different types of blinkers, and extension blinkers are for horses trying to get out. And when you put that extension blinker, he can't look to the right. He'll run straighter than if you took the blinker off. He'll try to bolt. So there's a lot of things to do with blinkers.
All right, guys, we want to go ahead and let Phil break down his top 7 horses in the Belmont Stakes tomorrow.
Okay, let me get with it real quick here. The first horse is the 10, Tacitus, with a 587. The second rated horse is War of Will, number 9, 586. A 1-point separation with all these handicapping factors. It's just amazing that it's that close. The third rated horse is number 5, Bourbon War, He's a 541, so he's not that far behind those top two, but he's got a 12-1 morning line, and the other two are 9-5 and 2-1. The fourth rated horse is Tax, number 4, 15-1 morning line. His past performance rating is a 525, so that's pretty healthy. The fifth rated horse is number 7, which is Sir Winston. He's 517 with a past performance rating. The sixth rated horse is number 2, and that's Everfast, and he has a 483. And the seventh rated horse is number 6, Spinoff, with a 475. So you can see from first to seventh, you've only got like a 112-point margin, which some people say, well, that's quite a bit. Well, first to fifth is only like 70 points. And when you start talking the amount of handicapping factors that go into this, it's really not that big a deal. That's close. So I would key that 10 and that 9 in most of your action, but don't leave the other ones off either. You know, I'm a strong believer in go on our website and see some of the postings that we do from our Facebook page on results, and you're going to see a lot of third and fourth rated horses that win at big numbers. But the sad part about it is if you catch one of those and he's hooked up with the other top rated horses, you want to make sure you have those. Don't just get hung up on one horse. These races are just too close, and they're still babies.
All right. Vince, you want to break it down for us?
Yeah.
Tell us who you like.
Yeah. You know, Mike, in the Preakness, we picked another winner. Phil and I, we both picked Improbable with War of Will as very close in the ratings. And, of course, War of Will got the job done. And now in this situation, and I haven't talked to Phil about selections, whatever, and I had, as I said, I picked Tacitus. I had him at a 200 rating, and I had a 198 rating for War of Will. And the difference between the two is, which I mentioned earlier, I'm taking a horse that had a couple of weeks off to be ready for going a mile and a half and be trained up to that distance. So I think it's going to come down between those two horses. I picked the 10 horse over the 9, but I wouldn't be shocked if the other 9 happened to beat us. But the other factor we have to look at is how they're going to go a mile and a half. Some of these horses will run great until 20 yards from the wire, and they peter out. It's just that the bloodline doesn't bring them that far. But Phil and I both agree, again, I picked the 10 over the 9, and that's the way I look at it. And some of these horses, I tried to break them down. Master Fencer, the only thing he's done in Japan, he's won 2 allowance races. He never beat any stake horses over there. And I think he's 6-7-1. I couldn't play that horse, no way. And there's another horse in here that's bigger than a lot of people's ideas, Sir Winston. He's won 2 races on synthetic tracks, nothing on dirt. How can I play him? Both of his dirt, he's never won a race. He's 0 for 5. So I take that into consideration. If he's winning on synthetic and now he's on dirt, well, I can't bet on him. So that's the reason I threw him out as well. But I hope that the listeners get lucky, and if we're right, we pick the 10 over the 9 and maybe take Phil's second, third, and fourth horses and put them in trifectas or superfectas, and maybe you get lucky.
Hey, Vince, I always kid people when they start talking about synthetics and grass and dirt and all that. They're not running on dirt tomorrow. They're running on sand.
That's right. You're right. You're right.
They don't call Belmont Big Sandy for nothing.
Oh yeah.
It's like the beach. It's like running at the beach.
No doubt. That's the truth.
All right, Bobby, are you still over there?
I'm here. I'm really enjoying listening to these guys. This is a treat for me and the fans, Mike, and for you.
Well, give us your pick.
I'll give you my choices after I've listened to everything these guys have said. I'm going to go with number 10, Tacitus, on top, based on they both like him first, and I'm going to go with that. I like what Vince had to say, that Tacitus has the rest period over War of Will and how important that is. And so I'm going to take Tacitus. Now I'm going to use the 10, and I'm going to do a trifecta box. My second horse is Tax, the 4. He's kind of my upsetter. Still has him ranked 4th, and it's a close ranking, so I like that 15-1 morning line. And then I'm going to use the 2, and I forget the 2's name. Do you have that, Phil?
Everfast.
Everfast.
Okay, so I'm going to box those 3 in a try box, and then I'm going to bet like across the board or win in place, something like that, on the 4 Tax. Anybody that knows me, I'm not going to bet any win money on 9-5 or 7-5. There's just no value. But I would take Tacitus. If you made me pick a winner, I would pick the 10. But I'm going to bet the 10-4-2 try box, and I'm going to bet the 4 win in place. So Tax is my bet. Tacitus is my, if you had to put a gun to my head, I'd take Tacitus. But I'm going to bet Tax because of the price.
Right.
That makes
Yeah,
sense,
he's
right,
15-1. Yeah, 15-1 morning line, and having Irad Ortiz on him doesn't really hurt him either.
Oh, no way.
Irad Ortiz is a great jockey, and he's a Belmont jockey. That's his home track, correct?
Yeah, those two brothers are really good riders, the Ortiz brothers.
Jose's on Tacitus, so I'm going to.
Yes, he is.
Ortiz.
There you
and
go.
Who's riding my 2?
Here, I'll
Luis
tell you in a
Saez.
second.
That's another outstanding rider, Luis Saez.
Yeah, Saez.
That's
Saez
good.
was a leading
Phil,
rider in Gulfstream for years. He's a champion rider, that guy.
Phil, I had a question for you, okay? And you're my good friend, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I want you to answer it for the fans that are listening. I am I have people bias, meaning I like jockeys, I like trainers.
I know you like Tyler Bays.
Yeah, he's
If Tyler Bays was riding a mule in this race, you'd be betting him.
Yeah, I probably would. Now, listen, let me defend myself.
Okay, I'm only kidding you. I'm only kidding you, Bobby.
I know, but let me defend myself, and you can answer it. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Vince Degregory has McCarran. He could have any of them. I mean, he had all the great ones. But let's just say he's got McCarran, and they're rolling, and they're leading the nation's leading jockey for 2 years in a row. Well, I like Vince Degregory as my agent, and I like McCarran on my horse. So I'm going to have bias towards anything that those guys are on because they're the best in the business at that time. So back in the day when I was in high school, it was Gary Stevens. I loved him. Alex Solis was just riding Snow Chief. That was Vince's jockey. That was Vince's. And so anything Alex Solis got on, I looked at him very strongly. Now, your rankings do not have any bias human element-wise, and I want you to explain that because I think the human element is big. So
okay. Don't confuse what I do with the non-human bias. It's the jockey situation is in that handicapping factor. It just doesn't carry as much weight as the animal running. Okay.
okay.
When I have those nearly 40 handicapping factors in there, the jockeys and what they've done, there's some points built up with them also. Okay, but it doesn't weigh as highly as the actual past performances of the horse because Vince knows riders like get good horses because they have good agents. They all do their homework, and so that circle seems to win most of the races because they're getting the best horses, they're the best people involved, they got the right trainers, they got the right jockeys and all that. But Vince knows himself that he's never seen a jockey carry a horse over the wire physically.
You took the word out of my mouth because I wanted to say that, Phil. I've been asked that question so many times, and I've talked to all the great ones as well, and they say maybe 10% in the drive to the wire, one jockey will be better than the other one, but only 10%. 90% is that horse. If I put those champion jockeys on 10, 15 to 1 shots every day, they wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. That's just the bottom line. They ride the Cadillacs when a lot of guys are riding the Volkswagen.
That's right.
And that makes them great.
Hey, one other thing that I can mention too, I don't want to knock the kids of today because it's in all sport. It's in all sports that we have. It changes from when Vince had those superior riders. You never saw that rail open up. If you're going to beat one of those guys, if you got to beat McCarran or Pinkai or one of those type of riders, you're going to have to go around them. These kids today open it up for their friends.
Yeah,
They open up that rail. It's terrible.
That's horrible. You're right, Phil. 100%. When I had Cordero, he wouldn't dare let you up in there. He said, if my horse is dying, you're still going to stay in there. You're not going to beat me in any time. So that's true, Phil.
Got to go around me, not inside me.
Hey, Vince.
Sure.
Patrick Valenzuela and Lafitte Pinkai. That's two guys that I recall. They were strong down the lane. Nobody got by Pinkai when it was head-to-head the last 100 yards. Am I right or wrong?
No, he was probably the strongest finisher that I've been around in my lifetime, and Arcaro was the same in his days in the 40s and 50s and 60s. But Lafitte, in my heydays in the 70s and 80s and 90s, he was the strongest finisher. And now we have another rider that I brought here, Joel Rosario, and he's on the same mold as Lafitte Pinkai. His forte is finishing in the drives, finishing strong, picking that horse's head up. So, yeah, Pinkai was the best.
Yeah, I think the strong forearms, the strong wrists, those guys, you can't tell me that there's not a part of that in the cohesiveness with that horse, that there's not some that are just a little bit better than the others.
That's one jump over the other one. You're right, Bobby. But 10%, 90% of that horse has got to get you to the wire. The other 10 is for you to switching sticks and picking his head up, especially if you're on a heavy-headed horse that runs with his head towards the ground. And the strong riders keep picking him up and pumping. The weak riders can't pick him up and pump, so that's why they get beat. But the strong riders with a heavy-headed horse, they win most of the time.
Hey, quick question.
Go ahead.
Quick question to you, Bobby. Question to you, Bobby. All this time that you have had my numbers, you thought that raw past performance number didn't include anything to do with the human element or the jockey? It's there. It's just not as big a factor. But you look at those numbers like on the 10 and the 9, Tactus and War of Will, a 587 and a 586, and look at the two jockeys, Jose Ortiz and Tyler Gaffleone. If either one of those two horses had a lesser known rider, and I'm not going to bring up any names because I just not going to do that. But the top four rated horses, the jockeys are Jose Ortiz, Tyler Gaffleone, Mike Smith, and Irad Ortiz. Those are the top four rated horses, and that's those jockeys. So those numbers, those jockey numbers are in there. It just doesn't weigh as heavily as the horse's actual past performances in races.
Okay,
because I always say the jockey does not carry the horse over the wire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so your handicap.
But it's in there.
Points wise, then, if let's say Mike Smith, who we know he's one of the best ever, or Ortiz is one of the best going now, those guys are in the top 10 in the standings at that meet. Well, what if for some reason Red Ortiz isn't having a good meet and he's down around out of the top 10, so he wouldn't get as many points? So what I'm asking is, does your ranking, is it concurrent with the current standings?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Oh yeah. If you're not going to find a rider in this race riding a horse in $1.5 million race that has a problem. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. These guys are on top of their game, or they wouldn't be in this race.
Oh yeah, Junior Leperoux, another outstanding rider.
Well, but let me ask you guys.
Sure.
Let me ask you guys. The winner of the Kentucky Derby, before he was DQ, was Maximum Security, right?
Yes.
That kid's a good rider. That kid was a good rider. He's not a slouch.
Okay, he's a good rider, but you know, what if you stick Gaffalione or one of the Ortizes or Mike Smith on that horse? Do you gentlemen think he would have drifted out and caused that, or do you think he'd have won?
I think he would have drifted out. I think he was scared off by the crowd noise and that camera guy.
That's very possible. True, but that jockey, Luis Saez, is as good a jockey as anyone in America. He's in the top 5 all the time, money earned title.
Yeah,
Saez was the jockey that was on him?
5 all the time.
I thought the stewards giving him a fine and days off was wrong. That was wrong.
All the jockeys,
in my opinion, they did the right thing on the DQ, because if he would have caused a pileup, no one would be talking about whether he should have been DQ'd or not. Okay, it was just damn lucky it didn't happen. He unfortunately got DQ'd. A lot of people went anger over that. It's water under the bridge. Forget about it. The stewards did the right thing. The reason they waited so long is they wanted to make damn sure.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with
I
that.
never have expressed my opinion on that, but that's what it is. Unfortunately, people that think that the stewards and the track are criminals and all that for DQing that horse, and Baffert made the comment he did was just because of the West being interest.
Maybe I can interject on that, Phil and Bobby, for your listeners. Jockeys do have rules. Every racetrack that they go, they are told by the stewards how to ride and what they expect of them, and they all have to protect each other in the race because of those rules. Now, the first rule we have, which I teach all the apprentice jockeys that I work for, the first thing is the jockey will say, the stewards will say, stay in your lane. You come out of the 1 hole, and you're coming out of that chute, you keep going. Don't go out in the 2, 3, 4 lane. Take somebody else's lane to where that jockey has to stand up behind and maybe clip his heels and go down. That's the first rule. The second rule is if he's trying to lug in, don't reach up and hit him. You reach up and you grab with both hands. You straighten his head up so he looks straight down the path. And then you hit him left-handed or right-handed. But you must straighten up your horse at all times. And when you come in the stretch, you can't drift from the 1 hole to the 5 hole like he let his horse drift. He should have reached up and grabbed him when he started to getting out and hit him right-handed. He would have went straight, but he let him drift. And as I think I explained this before when I had Angel Cordero, that was the technique that Angel used going into the turn, going a mile, whatever. He'd go out in the first turn, drift, take you out with him, and drop to the rail. And by the time you straightened up, you lost 4 lengths, and he's on his way. So in interaction of that ruling that they came down with, he let that horse drift from the 1 path to the 5 path. I could send you pictures and show you where he was and where he was when everything straightened away and there was jocks taken up in behind him, and that's what the problem was. All jockeys have to pay attention to the rules, and if you don't abide by them, they take your number down and they give you days.
Hey, Vince, on that point, because you've been around a long time, you've seen a lot of races, you know what the rules are, what should be done. Now, getting back, I don't want to beat a dead horse on this thing, but that Derby situation, when I heard high-quality people, trainers, I'm not going to mention names, but trainers, analysts, letting their emotions override their better judgment, saying, the track was sloppy, a 20-horse field, does that mean it's a free-for-all for crying out loud? You still have to abide by the rules. I don't care if it's 40 horses. Correct. You still have to ride the race correctly, and it was not done correctly. The rules were broken.
Yep.
Yes, he ran and was the best horse that day. He was. There's no doubt about it. But you can't put him in the winner's circle because of that. He broke the cardinal rule that could have caused a major pileup and deaths to jockeys and horses.
Oh yeah.
Period. That should have been the end of that. But people keep beating on that situation, and to me, it's just almost laughable now.
I agree with you 100%, no doubt.
Where is he anyway?
you just mentioned death to horses, and I want to branch that into something else. I really want to get Vince's opinion, because this has been brought up a little bit. What's going on at Santa Anita, Vince? What is the problem there?
Okay, Bobby, I'll try to tell everybody the best that I can and give you the straight answer that I can. They've been focusing, Peter's been focusing on California. And if you look down this year, 15 horses died in New York alone. And I think there was 18 that died in Gulfstream. But everybody's focused on California because the television crews are there and they're waiting, hoping the horse breaks down so they can put it on the airways and sell papers. But the other factor is, why do I think it's happening? It's very simple. When I was a young agent in New York most of the time, after after Thanksgiving Day, there was no more racing in New York until the spring. All them horses, some went to the farm, some went to Florida, but most of the time the sore horses got a chance to go to the farm and recuperate and get rid of a lot of the soreness. So then what happens? California. We have Hollywood Park became the fall meeting. Oak Tree became a fall meeting. So there's no such thing as any time off for any horses in California. We race year-round. So what happens? Those horses, they get sore. Now, how are they going to get better? If they're going to continually train and be sore and run on hard tracks, when the rain comes, they seal the racetrack, which is like concrete then. It's like you can't imagine. So them poor horses that are sore, they hit the ground, and those little legs of theirs, boom, they crack and break. And that's what happened when the rains came this winter. We had 11 inches of rain that didn't stop out here. And the old days, when I came to California, they never sealed the racetrack. We never had any fatalities because it was soft. But when it's hard and the horses are sore, that's going to keep happening not only here and other racetracks in America. We got to shut down on a lot of racing and give horses a chance to recuperate. It's like a ball player. When he gets injured, does he keep playing? No, he has to rest up and let the wounds heal, and then he comes back strong. These poor horses have not had a chance, Bobby, to recuperate. And there's probably going to be more throughout the year, not only in California. It'll be at all the tracks where they race year-round. Look at New York. They race in the winter. Snow is flying, and it's 30 degrees. You think them horses are not sore? They don't tell you how many they break down there. You got to protect the animals, but the government and the states want you to continually to race. They want that money, and that's the major problem. It's all on money, and it's sad, and I feel bad about it. I keep talking to the upper echelon here. I said, about time you people stop being so greedy. Get less days allotted to California racing. Let's have 4 weeks off, 5 weeks off from one meeting to the next. Let the animals recuperate. No, it's all the money, and I feel bad about it.
Hey, Vince, look at the human sports, not just the animals, but baseball, football, basketball. They have their rest periods. They don't play year round. Yeah, some of the guys, work out and play workup games and all that, but the season is over. Horse racing season never ends. Never ends.
And that's what's happened. You're right.
And they're so much more delicate than the human. When the death rate is what it is, to me, with the amount of races there are, the amount of training going on, it's really insignificant numbers, to tell you the truth. When you look at the animal itself, the legs on those horses versus the weight they're carrying.
Yeah, and 1,000.
I'm surprised the numbers aren't higher. And that PETA group, they need to go.
Right, either one of you, you come to California, I'll bring you around the track in the morning and let you see how them horses are treated from one barn to the next. They're treated, they get a bath every day, they get the best food that they could ever have. They're treated so well. And PETA, they put more dogs and cats down, and they got the nerve to try to shut down horse racing. Shame on them. That's just bad. And
hey, Vince. Vince, I want to do some geographics here. Bobby and me and you, we're all California people, right?
Right.
Vince, you're pretty much Hollywood area, and I'm out here in San Dimas, California. Bobby's in Upland, California. The only foreigner we have on this show is Mike.
Oh, Mike.
Actually, I'm the only one from a United States state. Y'all live out there with them liberal Californians and all them Nancy Pelosi's and Dianne
I knew I
Feinsteins.
could churn the. Hey, Bobby, I knew I could churn the butter on that one.
Well, I don't know why anybody would want to live out there, because actually the capital of horse racing is in Kentucky, which is like 15 minutes from my house. So
Beautiful out there.
Turfway
Guys,
Park, 15 minutes away.
Hey, I've been wanting to ask you, Mike. Have you do you go to Indiana Grand at all?
No, that's probably 2 hours away. I go to Turfway Park.
Oh, it is.
Turfway Park is the closest one. I've been going there since I was a little kid.
That's good night racing, isn't it?
Yeah, Keeneland's over here also. Keeneland's not too far, and
Yeah,
of course
yeah.
you had River Downs at one point. I think there's still. I haven't been there in forever though.
If you ever get a chance, go to Turfway, go to Keeneland, Churchill, and ask to be a visitor, go on the backside and see how them animals are treated. And then you'll say, wow. And that's with all this negative publicity that's going around, not only in America, I got people from over in Argentina sending me texts. What's going on in California? What happened? And they all know, all racetrackers, when I say too much racing, and they say, yes, right. The horses need a break, and that's the truth.
Yeah. Well, let's end on a good note with some winners for tomorrow.
I've been trying to get Mike out here to California, so I'll get him out here, and then we'll bring him around, Vince. We'll get a hold of you, and
Yeah,
we'll go to the
let's
race.
do that. Yes,
Let's
do
do
that,
it.
Bobby.
Well, I was supposed to come out there and play a game called Cornhole on national television with Steve Risley in a challenge, but Steve Risley's a coward, just like he accused Kev.
And he lives out here, right?
He lives out there, but he didn't want to go all the way to Vegas to get his ass smoked by me because he's a big-ass sissy. And if he's listening, we could probably still hook that up because it's supposed to be at the Westgate Hotel. The guy who runs the national tournament invited us to be on. Risley, told us he's 100% healthy now, so I'll whoop his ass even if I'm 50% healthy. But he doesn't have the balls to do it. The only way he could do it probably would be if Bobby Knight traveled with him and then maybe threw a chair at me when I was throwing the cornhole bags.
Bobby Knight threw a chair at you.
And
you would even compete blindfolded, right?
Well, I would play blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back.
Oh boy.
Because Steve is similar to a woman, I believe. So, Steve, if you're listening, that's not till I think that was the week of July 4 for that, wasn't it, Bobby? So, we all know Steve's going to listen to this because I'm Steve's hero. And Steve's intimidated by me, and he'll never take that bet. Because as Charlie Daniels would say, he's going to regret. Now, I won't finish the song because then I would sound a little bit arrogant. But
Been fun, Bobby and Mike. I'm always happy to be on the show with you, and I hope that some way I can enlighten the people that are listening that horse racing is not bad. They're not killing horses intentionally, but the point is going to be put across eventually that they're going to be less racing because the owners are not going to put up for it, and they're going to get their game straightened out so it should be, where the horses are going to be taken care of better, that we don't lose a lot of horses every year.
Hey, how about
feel
this,
bad
though?
about
If you want to do a comparison here, the NFL has all kind of players that are broken down, beat up, have a hard time making it past the age of 50. And the NFL and the people that own the NFL want to play more games. So maybe somebody needs to call something on the NFL. But the NFL is a bunch of billionaire owners who own half of the country anyways through the businesses they own outside of football, and nothing gets done about that. But nobody will say anything. And the sad thing is, if a horse dies, everybody freaks out. If a college football player dies because they were treated poorly by their coach, that coach keeps his job, and everybody just goes on and say, hey, shit happens. So it's sad the way society is now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, Mike. You're right.
And also, I want to finish the show with Risley, don't be a coward. Let's go. July 4th in Las Vegas. Bobby, anything before we wrap it up?
No, we're good. I just want to thank these guys, and I'm hoping that we can maybe, Mike, you and I sit down and talk about what kind of show that you would like for your network, and maybe we can get these guys like on once a week or once a month or whatever you feel is appropriate. Get these guys. We don't have to just do this for the big races. I mean, Breeders' Cup is coming, and we could have maybe every other week horse race talk, because I think there's a lot of fans out there that like to go to the races, and if these guys would love to do a show, I'd love to have them on.
Yeah, it'd be great to get some of the old jockeys on, too. Have them on the show.
Yeah, I'm all.
Well, Vince knows a lot of those.
Yeah, it'd be kind of a Legends of Horse Racing show.
Yeah, I more or less, Mike and Bob, whenever I'm asked, I've done a lot of radio shows and TV shows, and I've jumped to whenever they ask me, I can't get there fast enough, because I like to talk to the fans, the knowledge that I gathered through other people that were ahead of me that I learned from, that if I can help them to be a better handicapper or on any question they can ask me, I enjoy doing that. And if I can help you every week with Phil or whatever it may be, and anything to help your listeners out there, I'm all for it.
All right, guys, I want to thank
you
you all for coming on again. Make sure you follow Phil at the Handicapping Guide. I didn't call it the Handicapper's Guide. The Handicapping Guide. I didn't call it again. See, Bobby said that I always screw that up, but I think I only screw it up like 75% of the time. And I think it's obvious from my mental slips that actually that's Phil's fault for not naming it the Handicapper's Guide. But I want to remind everybody, if you want to go bet on the race tomorrow, go to Bet DSI, or DSI. What the hell's the name of this? BetDSI.eu. They will give you a 100% cashback bonus up to $1,000. So if you go on there, you put $1,000 in, you'll get $500 extra in casino play and another $500 extra in sports play, and maybe try a few of those super trifectas with. I was in the Hoosier Lottery thing there for a while with the Super Trifecta. But with the Superfecta, maybe you can make a little bit of money that way. Make sure you put in the promo code TGT. Me and Mr. Sheridan will be back at 2 o'clock tomorrow to do our normal Sheridan report. So make sure you listen to us then. We'll give you the heads up on the NBA Finals and on the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign off. I want to remind everybody, check out the Sheridan Report, the Handicapping Guide. And I want to thank Vince again and Phil for coming on this show. And I want to remind everybody, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, 300 other places where you can hear sports podcasts. You'll find the grueling truth. So for Vince Degregory, Phil Rankin, Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.